What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be giving you an in-depth Fuse guide. Now, as I'm sure most of you know, Fuse did receive some buffs in Season 10, and it has been a while since I made a video on Fuse. So we'll go over all of his abilities, I'll briefly touch on his new changes, and I'll give you tons of tips on how to dominate with Fuse in Season 10. Stay tuned, because Fuse has something that none of the other legends have going for them. Let's get into it.
You come at your old mate Fusey, you best not miss.
The first thing to discuss real quick is where does Fuse fit into the current meta, and if I was making a tier list, I would have to put him in A or B tier depending on how good you can be with him. Fuse is the one and only explosives guy in Apex. His kit centers around area denial and dealing damage. Fuse is a very tough legend to balance, so although I know a lot of newer players have thought his ability should deal more damage or be easier to use, the reality is Apex has acknowledged Fuse's abilities don't fit in well with the rest of the legends because it centers around dealing damage primarily. So they did admit if they could go back in time, they would have either created a different legend or totally reworked his abilities. But with that said, if you can master Fuse, you can learn to be a huge pest in your lobbies. Let's talk about Fuse's passive, the Grenadier. Now, Fuse is able to stack 2 grenades per backpack slot, and he can either launch those grenades with his arms so that they go faster and further, or he can swap to throwing them like every other legend. Each situation in Apex is obviously different, so it's going to be totally preference on which way you want to use these grenades, but I have to say this change to his passive makes Fuse 10 times better. I'm going to talk to you about whether you should throw or whether you should launch these grenades, because personally, I like to throw them normally if I'm up close, unless it's the arc star, because launching arc stars with his arm is actually really accurate. But for the most part, like I said, throwing thermites or frag grenades is definitely my preference. And if I want to thermite a door up close or cut off an access point, or if I want to roll a frag grenade up the stairs or down the stairs or throw a vertical frag grenade, then I'm definitely going to choose to do that versus launching it. You actually can't launch a vertical frag grenade with Fuse because he's going to launch it so far in the air, it won't have time to come back down and blow up. However, I will say spam launching any throwable from a distance where you have some high ground is always a solid move and will surely infuriate your opponent. There is little they can do if you spam multiple grenades on them from an advantageous angle, and if you combine these with his tactical or ultimate, which I'll elaborate on more in a moment, it just makes for a deadly combination. So if you're new to Fuse, try getting used to the trajectory of how the ordnance is launched with his arm and decide what's more comfortable for you. It will take some time, but the better you are with throwables, the better you will be in any given fight. Because just know, throwables in Apex are very strong if used correctly. There is somewhat of a skill gap with them because the same grenade for one person could do no damage because it wasn't placed properly, and the next person could do 100 damage with that same grenade. If I'm playing Fuse, I'm always making room for at least 2 slots in my backpack for grenades. They are always going to help out in fights in many different ways. The last thing I'll mention on this is back in Season 3 and before, every legend was actually able to carry 2 grenades per 1 backpack slot, but it started to become so overpowered because in late game competitive scenarios, teams would die easily to multiple grenades that were meticulously placed by the enemy team. So keep this in mind, if you are going to try to master Fuse and you make it to late game, you have something that no other legend has. Moving on to Fuse's tactical, the Knuckle cluster. You get 2 of these Knuckle clusters initially, and then there will be a cooldown for the third one of about 14 seconds. Now, this was also buffed in Season 10, and it lasts for twice as long as it previously did, but here's the kick. It lasts for about 5 seconds from the initial hit to finish, and they're saying the damage per second remains the same. So, previously, I believe it did a maximum of about 50 damage, and now it's looking like it can do up to 70. It's going to be really rare that all of the Knuckle cluster will hit because it doesn't completely stay with your enemy even if you stick them. Here you can see I stick someone, but then they run and they are able to run out of the blast from it. But I will say if someone is backed up into a corner or stuck somewhere indoors and you Knuckle cluster them, it will be really hard for them to move out of the blast radius without taking the majority of that damage. The Knuckle cluster can also break through doors, and the damage can carry through once the door has been destroyed. This may not seem like a big deal to some people, but it has some serious outplay ability to the smart players who know how to use doors in this game to their advantage. I have to say, the biggest downfall to this ability is if you use it close range, you're highly susceptible to taking damage from it yourself. So you've got to be really careful of not taking a bunch of damage from your own abilities as Fuse. I love using this for area denial as well as initially getting opponents weak or trying to finish them off if they're already weak. Lastly, let's talk about Fuse's ultimate, the Motherlode. This is a huge ring of fire, and this was also buffed in Season 10. So enemies now will be highlighted when they are within it. It will basically be a bloodhound scan of the enemies that are in the Motherlode. This change adds a lot of dynamics to Fuse's ultimate because it's not always super easy to see what's going on with it or to deal a ton of damage with it. Because if you don't hit them with the edge of the flames, basically once the ultimate is launched, enemies can run through the flames in the beginning and take minimal damage. But if they wait a few seconds and then try to run through it, they will start to take 35 damage and then a tick for like 5 to 8 damage. So this aspect makes the ultimate very inconsistent, because sometimes you will deal like no damage to opponents when you really feel like they should be punished because you placed it correctly and they ran through the flames. But then on the flip side, other times they will take significant amount of damage from the flames, and it just is, I don't know, it feels like a coin flip a lot of the times when I'm using it. However, you can ADS with the launcher and shoot it from very far away, but I also like to just use the ADS to gather intel from far distances. It can act as like a wide angle sniper scope if you're trying to figure out where people are at or what space is potentially occupied. His ultimate has to be the most clunky ultimate in all of Apex though. Because it's a ring of fire and he launches it at an angle, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. It will definitely take some practice to figure out the dynamics of it. And also, when you are trying to use it indoors, it essentially banks off the ceiling and comes down in a more condensed area, which can work out well in some instances, but in others, it can also burn you and totally just not do what it's supposed to do. You should know your teammates do get slowed down in your ultimate as well, and there is a red tint that is added to their screen. And when I was first getting used to Fuse, it would be tough to tell if an ultimate was my teammates or an enemy's because it had really similar effects. If you guys are enjoying this video, please be sure to smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. It will only take a second of your time and it really helps the video out. I have a few more things to talk about regarding his ultimate before I wrap up this video. When you use your ultimate, I found it's best to have my teammates nearby to try to capitalize on catching enemies when they're in the ring of fire. Now, as I said throughout the video, area denial is one of Fuse's main aspects, so if you can catch enemies in the ring, and now that they're highlighted, you have a lot of options to eliminate them. And make sure to pair your tactical or other grenades with his ultimate. If you do this, enemies can't really do anything, and hopefully they'll end up taking a lot of damage, and then you can just finish them off with your weapon. Now, Fuse is fairly similar to Caustic if you've ever tried out Caustic, because Caustic is also known for area denial and his gas deals damage and disorients enemies. However, the difference is Fuse does take damage to his own abilities, and his abilities are much more clunky at times. Now listen, Fuse is not an easy legend to be good at, but if you practice with him, he has insane potential to outclass a lot of the other legends. Remember this when you're trying to master Fuse in Season 10. If you guys would like to see what it takes to drop a 4K damage and 20 kill game with Fuse, I will link that video in the info card right now. And if you missed my most recent upload, 20 tips you must know for Season 10, it will be available at the end screen. I hope this video helps you improve with Fuse for Season 10, and I will catch you on the next upload. Peace.
Just wasn't your moment, kid. Tell the devil Fuse sent ya.
Try and make them